I see all the keys and the notes associated with the keys in music. I see them all in colours. When I listen to music, sometimes I might be aware of the actual key, which means I see the colour associated with that key, or I'm not aware of the key and my mind then doesn't really know what colour to associate because I'm not aware of the key. I would have been 5 or 6 listening to Mozart's overture to the Marriage of Figaro opera, which my mother played on a record, and I can remember singing the music in my head, and I was seeing white, or I was sort of aware of white. I then also climbed up to the piano as a young child, and I noticed that my mother would play several notes at once, and so I tried to copy that and formed a chord, and so I started seeing that dark royal blue colour.
So I have grapheme colour synesthesia, which means that I perceive numbers and letters as inherently coloured, and I perceive it in the sense that when I'm reading, I see colours in my mind, for example. So when I see black text, it appears as black to me, but in my mind there's kind of this very visual experience, like when you think of where you imagine, if somebody said to think of a tree, it's kind of there, like in the mind's eye, that's where the colour exists. So it kind of runs alongside the experience of reading, so that it's like a very aesthetic as well as conceptual experience. It's hard to describe how it defines my sense of self because I don't know what to compare it against, but it's just something I kind of carry around with me. And I also kind of interpret other people in that way. So when I get to know them and I know the colours in their name, it's like they have their own unique palette as well, and everybody has their own palette, and that's kind of how I think about people, and they become associated with that in the same way that I am. I think it affects me in the sense that I have this very strong attraction to colour, and I love working with colour. I love mixing paint, and I find it very, very pleasing and very enjoyable. I think it makes me more inclined to finding meaning in things, and it kind of adds a certain level of, I don't know, beauty or metaphor to everyday life. I feel like I derive extra meanings out of very typically menial things like people's names or their birth date, or even how I perceive months and dates and things like this. So I've been trying for a really long time to figure out why certain letters are certain colours and what the logic is behind it, or where those colours even came from. And I realised more recently that the beginning of the alphabet is much, much more colourful to me, up until about the letter P, and then after that the colours start to get quite murky and grey and dark, and that's possibly because I've realised that I learnt the beginning of the alphabet first, and perhaps I started running out of colours, or...
Well, I think that, yes, some of the colours are pure. E major, for example, I just see red. Whereas another colour, like A flat major, is not so easy to describe because there's a swirly blend of colour. So there's a pale beige mixed with this tinge of yellow, a bit like if you cracked an egg over it and over actual paint, beige paint, and swirled it in a little bit. I'm aware that my brain has done something that I didn't do, which I'm responding to. I just wonder if there's a connection between the fact that my mind works that way and my passion and my desire and my intense interest to want to explore it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it raises a lot of questions about consciousness, perception, and the structure of the brain. I know there's different theories about how synesthesia works or why people experience it. I think a really popular one is the idea that different regions of the brain are interacting with one another and communicating. And so I think that theory kind of opens up lots of questions about how, if the brain is structured differently or it's expanded or different regions interact, how we can potentially perceive reality in like alternate ways, which I think is a very interesting thing to consider.
There's a level of consciousness that I'm not necessarily in control of.
As quoted by David Eagleman, a typical neuron makes about 10,000 connections to neighbouring neurons. Given the billions of neurons, this means that there are as many connections in a single cubic centimetre of brain tissue as there are stars in the Milky Way. Try to imagine that if every time you heard music you saw an explosion of colour, or if every time you ate cauliflower you tasted purple, or even if, like Harvard neurologist Dr. Joel Salinas, when you saw somebody else get touched, you felt it on your own body. Well, a century of research concludes that for 4.4% of the population, synesthesia is their everyday reality.